Hey, welcome back. So, not only the way you word your questions is important, but also in which order you place them in your questionnaire. So, questionnaire organization can have an important influence on the ease and the flow at which people go through your survey. So, it makes it a lot easier or more difficult on respondents depending on how you order your questionnaire. But it can also actually affect the quality of your data. Because if your questionnaire is very difficult to follow, people might get tired or be very put off by the difficulty of it, give wrong answers, or even worse, just stop participating. So for the ease of participation and encouraging people to continue all the way to the end, questionnaire organization is really important. So, and there's two critical aspects to questionnaire organization. First of all, your introduction. Secondly, your questionnaire flow. The introduction is kind of like a cover letter. It accompanies a mail survey or an online survey, and in that sense, it is similar to opening comments before you do an interview with someone. Basically, welcoming people to the survey. Sometimes you explain a little bit about what the topic will be, and then in some cases, you can ask explicit consent. By letting them click an I agree button, but you could also state by clicking on the next button, you consent to participating in this survey. So there's different ways of formalizing that consent. Then you let them click continue, and that's when the survey begins. Now, this introduction or this cover letter has a couple main functions. First of all, it allows you to identify or not identify the sponsor behind the study. So this is called disguised or undisguised acknowledgement of the sponsor behind a research study. In some cases, you may want to keep it disguised simply to avoid unintended influence on respondents' answers. In one of the previous sessions, I talked about the fact that if you disclose a certain sponsor of a study at the beginning of a study, it could influence people's answers. Think of, for example, mentioning that the survey is sponsored by Weight Watchers, then people will definitely be a little bit more inclined to answer in a socially desirable way. Second function is that you can indicate the purpose of the study at the beginning of your introduction. Pretty clear. Again, you can go as much in depth as you want to without disclosing the whole detail of your study. You could explain how the respondent was selected. This is not a must, but you could in case there was a random sample or in case snowball sampling was used or any other sampling method, which we will discuss in the next class, by the way. But if you want to disclose the sampling method, you can do it here. You could also mention incentives for participation. So sometimes people are formally asked if they're willing to participate in a survey. That's something you can ask at that time as well. You could also mention that they could win a voucher or cinema tickets, movie theater tickets, or anything like that, or a gift card by participating if that's indeed the case. So in that case, you could let them know to leave their email address at the end of the survey. And then lastly, an introduction can help determine if a respondent is suitable. So you could maybe mention in there, if you, for example, only need people who recently bought a certain type of car, you could ask whether they indeed bought that type of car in the past half year, and those who say no can be redirected to the end of the survey. So in that sense, you can kind of use it as a way to complement screening questions at the beginning of your survey. Some of the most common incentives that are given in research are, first of all, of course, money. That tends to work best. Gifts or gift cards can help. Sometimes merely offering a copy of the study results once the results are in can be sufficient to motivate people to participate or to get gatekeepers to actually give you permission to access a certain pool of respondents. A unique feeling you can give them, so basically flattering them, saying their opinion is really important to you and matters a lot to understand consumer behavior better. And then lastly, very important is anonymity and confidentiality. The difference between these two is that with anonymity, you as a researcher don't even know their identity. So the results are completely anonymous and no personally identifiable information is collected. Whereas with confidentiality, there might be some personally identifiable information that gets collected, but it will not get disclosed to third parties. So it basically stays with the researcher. The second main aspect of questionnaire organization is questionnaire flow, and this pertains to the sequencing of questions, question blocks, structure of your overall questionnaire. So obviously you want to make sure your questionnaire follows an understandable logical order. This will, of course, help facilitate respondents' ease of answering, and the entire questionnaire should be kept as short as possible while still having all your crucial questions in there. Sometimes students ask me what would be a good length for a questionnaire, and usually the average person shouldn't be taking longer than 5, definitely not more than 8 or 10 minutes. With an experiment, it can sometimes take a little longer before a simple questionnaire. I'd say stick to 5 to 8 minutes maximum. This is a good overview that I'm not going to discuss in detail in this online class. You can just watch it when you go through the slides. This is about questionnaire flow in the sense of which questions to ask first, which questions to ask last. And there's some debate about whether you should ask warm-ups first or demographic questions towards the beginning or towards the end. So that depends very much on the type of research project you have overall. So if your questionnaire has a lot of warm-up questions, yeah, sure, ask them in the beginning. But if your questionnaire doesn't really have any easy introductory questions to basically get people familiar with the topic or ease into things, in that case, you could use demographic questions in the beginning to kind of warm people up in that sense. Other than that, I would be a fan of putting the demographic questions at the end, because usually by the end of a survey, respondents are a bit mentally depleted. So just filling in some demographic data is easy. So I would keep the most important questions that you really need answers to more towards the beginning or the middle of the survey. Now, screening questions are always asked first because those are screening questions. They are screening respondents on whether they should be in the survey or not. For example, if you have a questionnaire about, let's say, hard seltzer, and you only want people age 21 and over to respond to your survey, then you could have a screening question in the beginning. What is your age? And if people indicate that they're younger than 21, they can skip to the end of the survey. Talking about skipping, there's actually a couple things you can do to improve your questionnaire flow. Skip logic, display logic, and branching. Skip logic is a way to let respondents skip over a certain question depending on their answer to a previous question. Display logic kind of is the same idea but has a different mechanism. It allows you to either display or not display a certain question based on people's answer to a previous question. And then branching is pretty much the same as skip logic, except that instead of skipping a question, you basically skip over a whole set of questions. So this is more of like a macro level type of jump that can happen in your questionnaire. Luckily, with several online survey tools, it becomes much easier to create and disseminate these questionnaires. There's many different ones. I use Qualtrics for my own research, and it's actually also the one that gets adopted by SDSU. So you can sign up for a free account on Qualtrics.com. The information is in the syllabus, but definitely make sure you have a Qualtrics account before we start going into survey development in class.